I still remember that afternoon. The smell of rain, the sound of my own heartbeat, and the way my stepfather's words sliced through me like glass. He looked me in the eye and said, "You're not my responsibility, Emily." Just 7 words. But they buried a lifetime of pretending. For years, I had called him Dad. I believed I was part of his family, that my loyalty, my quiet sacrifices, my constant efforts would mean something. But in that moment, standing in the middle of our living room with everyone watching, I realized I was nothing more than an outsider they tolerated out of courtesy. My mother stayed silent. My stepsister Olivia smiled, a slow, satisfied smile that told me this had been planned all along. My hands trembled, not out of fear, but from the humiliation that burned through me. That was the moment I understood. Love in this house was never given, only measured. And I had already failed the test. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just stood there, promising myself one thing: they would regret the day they made me feel invisible. When my mother married Mark Hart, everyone said we were lucky. He was respected, wealthy, and charming, the kind of man who made everyone around him feel safe. For my mother, it was a second chance at stability. For me, it was supposed to be a new beginning. I was 17, nervous but hopeful. I told myself, maybe this is what a real family feels like. At first, it did. Mark was polite, attentive, and almost fatherly. He helped me with college forms, asked about my grades, even bought me a small silver bracelet on my birthday. But his kindness always felt careful. Like a performance he didn't want to mess up. Olivia, his real daughter, was 4 years younger, loud, pretty, and used to being adored. The first time I met her, she hugged me and whispered, "Welcome to the family." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Our dinners were picture-perfect. Rachel, my mother, would serve roasted chicken while Mark shared stories from his law firm. Olivia would interrupt him with her own, and laughter would fill the table. I'd laugh too, though no one asked me about my day. Sometimes, Mark's gaze would linger on Olivia's stories with pride, while mine seemed to fade into the background. When I got into my dream university, everyone congratulated Olivia for getting a modeling audition the same week. Mark raised a toast to her, not to me. My mother squeezed my hand under the table, whispering, "Let it go, sweetheart." I smiled, because what else could I do? There were family photos, framed, smiling, polished. In most of them, I was somewhere at the edge, cropped slightly by accident. It became a quiet pattern. Olivia in the center, Mark beside her, Rachel holding the piece. The extra piece that didn't quite fit. Sometimes, I'd hear whispers late at night. Mark's voice low and firm. "She's not my real daughter, Rachel. You can't expect me to treat them the same." My mother never replied, or if she did, I never heard her words, only the silence afterward. Still, I tried. I helped around the house, remembered birthdays, made coffee for Mark before his meetings. I thought maybe, if I showed him enough care, he'd see me as his own. When he'd pat my shoulder and say, "Good girl," my heart would leap, until Olivia would stroll in, toss her hair, and instantly become the focus again. Every family event felt like a test I kept failing. I'd bring him thoughtful gifts, he'd give her diamonds. I'd earn scholarships, she'd get praise for existing. Yet I kept smiling, pretending it didn't matter. Pretending I didn't notice. The last Sunday before everything fell apart, we had dinner with Grandma Louise. She clinked her glass and said proudly, "Mark's blood runs strong in Olivia. You can see it in her eyes." Then she turned to me and added, "You're a nice girl, Emily, but you'll never be one of them." The room fell quiet. My mother looked down at her plate. Mark didn't correct her. And Olivia? She smirked. That night, lying in my bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "Something's not right here." I didn't know it then, but that uneasy feeling, that quiet ache, was the first crack in the family picture I thought would last forever. It started small, a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I was passing by Mark's office one morning when I caught his voice, calm and dismissive. "She doesn't need that share, Rachel. Olivia's future depends on this inheritance. Emily's independent. She'll manage." My mother's tone was shaky. "But Mark, she's your daughter too." "She's your daughter," he interrupted, his voice hard as stone. I froze outside the door, my stomach twisting. I wasn't even worth an equal discussion. Just an obstacle in his plan. That evening, I tried to pretend nothing had happened. We had guests over, some of Mark's business partners and their wives. Olivia floated around the room in her designer dress, laughing, calling him Dad like the title itself was her crown. When I approached to offer drinks, one of the women smiled at me politely and asked, "Oh, are you the maid?" Olivia laughed. "No, she just likes to help out." The laughter around the table was polite but sharp. Mark didn't correct them. He just smiled faintly, as if embarrassed by my presence. Later, I found him on the balcony. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked quietly. He sighed. "Emily, you take things too personally. Learn to laugh it off." "Would you have laughed if it were Olivia?" I snapped before I could stop myself. His eyes hardened. "Don't compare yourself to her. It's not the same." That night, I cried for the first time in years. Not because I was hurt, but because I finally understood my place in his world. Days turned into weeks. Olivia's graduation party became a grand event. There were lights, flowers, a live band, all planned by Mark himself. When I asked if I could help, he said, "Just stay out of the way, Emily. Olivia wants it perfect." I stayed quiet, standing at the edge of the celebration, watching him give a speech about how proud he was of his daughter. A week later, I found the will papers in a drawer. My name had been erased, literally erased, from the inheritance clause. I sat on the floor, staring at the signatures, feeling something cold settle inside me. My mother found me there. Her face went pale. "Emily, listen to me," she whispered. "Mark thinks this is what's best for everyone. Don't make things worse." "Worse?" I said, my voice breaking. "You mean, worse than being erased from my own family?" That night, during dinner, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "So it's true?" I asked, my voice trembling but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've given everything to Olivia?" Olivia looked up from her phone, feigning innocence. "What are you talking about?" Mark sighed, setting his fork down. "Emily, let's not make a scene." "Why not?" "You've already made one," I shot back. "You've turned this family into your little kingdom, and I'm just the servant who never belonged here." For a moment, the room went still. My mother whispered, "Please, Emily, stop." But I didn't. "You've always chosen her. Every time. Every single time." Mark stood, his voice cold and cutting. "I won't tolerate this disrespect. You need to remember your place." "My place?" I whispered. "You already reminded me. I'm not your responsibility." The silence after that felt heavier than any slap. Olivia smiled, just slightly, knowing she had won. I got up from the table, heart pounding, hands trembling, and walked out without another word. Outside, the night air was cold, biting. The lights from the house blurred through my tears. I could hear them laughing again inside, the same easy laughter that had always excluded me. That was the night something inside me broke for good. Because when a family treats you like a stranger, you stop trying to belong, and start thinking about how to make them finally see what they've done. After that dinner, nothing was ever the same again. The air in our house changed, thicker, colder, sharper. Every look felt like a quiet accusation. Every word had a hidden edge. Mark no longer pretended to care, his politeness vanished like smoke. One morning, I came down for breakfast to find Olivia sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone while Mark read the newspaper. My seat, my usual seat, was gone, replaced by a vase of flowers. I hesitated, confused. "Oh, sorry," Olivia said, pretending to notice me. "Dad thought the table looked better this way." Mark didn't look up. "You can eat in the kitchen if you like. The maids aren't using it right now." The words hit harder than any slap. My mother's eyes flickered toward me, but she said nothing. That silence hurt even more. At work, I began to withdraw. I couldn't focus. Mason, my friend, noticed. "You're fading, Em. You used to fight back." I forced a smile. "I'm just tired." But inside, I was exhausted from pretending not to care, from swallowing humiliation until it tasted like air. Then came the annual family reunion, Mark's pride and joy. Everyone from his side of the family was there, uncles, aunts, cousins, business partners. The house shimmered with expensive laughter and expensive lies. I wore a simple blue dress my mother had given me years ago. Olivia, of course, wore a gown that could blind the moon. As soon as I entered, Grandma Louise's voice echoed across the room. There she is, the outsider with the stubborn pride. Everyone laughed lightly, thinking it was a joke. Mark smiled, not denying it. I froze in place, my cheeks burning. "Oh, Grandma," Olivia said sweetly, "don't be mean. Emily's trying her best to fit in." The words were poison disguised as kindness. Later, during a toast, Mark raised his glass high. "To my daughter Olivia, my greatest blessing and pride." I waited. Just a small mention. Just my name. But there was nothing. Only clinking glasses and hollow cheers. I turned to my mother. "Are you hearing this?" I whispered. Her lips trembled. "Please, not here." I laughed. A short, bitter laugh. "Of course. Never here, never anywhere." After the party, I overheard Mark speaking to one of his friends. "I tried with Emily, but you know how it is. Some people just don't belong." I stood behind the door, trembling. Every syllable was another cut. Days later, at Olivia's engagement dinner, it happened again. The public humiliation that finally cracked whatever patience I had left. Olivia stood beside her fiancé, smiling as guests congratulated her. When I approached to give her a small gift, she took it, looked at it, and said loudly, "Oh, you shouldn't have, this must have cost you a week's salary." Laughter erupted. Mark chuckled too. My fingers went cold. "At least it's something I earned myself," I said softly. Her eyes narrowed, but before she could reply, Mark stepped in. "Enough, Emily. Don't ruin her night." "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "Wouldn't want to ruin perfection." That night, I sat alone in my room, replaying every scene, every insult, every smile that wasn't real. The humiliation had stopped stinging, it had turned into something quieter, darker. Mason called. "You can't keep letting them break you like this." "I'm not breaking," I whispered. "I'm learning." "Learning what?" he asked. "How to end it?" There was silence on the line. Then Mason said carefully, What are you planning?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know yet. But I could feel it coming, something irreversible, something that would finally make them see the pain they'd tried so hard to ignore. And when it came, no one in that house would ever forget it. It happened 3 months after Olivia's engagement. By then, I had learned to move like a shadow in my own house, silent, careful, unseen. I no longer tried to earn smiles or attention, I simply existed between their laughter. But I didn't know that the worst was still waiting, planned, deliberate, and cruelly public. Mark called it a simple family dinner. The kind where people wear polite smiles and pretend everything is fine. I didn't suspect anything. I even helped set the table, arranging candles while Olivia hovered nearby, humming softly. "You might want to look extra nice tonight," she said with a grin. "It's an important evening." I didn't ask why. I just nodded. When everyone gathered, Mark stood at the head of the table, raising his glass. "I have an announcement," he said, his voice filled with pride. "As you all know, I've decided to update my estate plan to secure Olivia's future." I froze. My fork slipped from my hand. He continued, calm, almost rehearsed. "Olivia will inherit the family business, the property, and all associated assets. Rachel and I have agreed that it's the right thing to do. Emily," he turned toward me, "you're independent, hardworking. You don't need my help." My chest tightened, but I tried to stay composed. "So you're cutting me out entirely?" I asked, voice trembling. Olivia giggled. "Don't take it so personally, Em. It's not about you, it's about family." Family. The word struck me like lightning. My mother reached for my hand under the table, whispering, "Please, don't make a scene." But I couldn't hold it in. "A scene?" My voice rose despite myself. "You've already made one, Mom. You let him erase me while smiling through it." Mark's tone sharpened. "Enough. Don't embarrass yourself." The guests, a few family friends, stared in uncomfortable silence. Grandma Louise cleared her throat. "Mark's right, dear. You should be grateful he took care of you all these years." I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Took care of me? You mean tolerated me?" I looked at Olivia. "You finally got what you wanted, didn't you?" She tilted her head with mock sympathy. "It's not my fault you were never his real daughter." Something inside me shattered right then. Not my heart, but the illusion I'd been clinging to all my life. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at her and whispered, "You're right. I'm not." I walked out before they could see the tears burning behind my eyes. Outside, the air was cold, the sky heavy with clouds. I sat on the steps, hugging myself as laughter drifted faintly from inside. Mason found me there later. He'd come to pick me up, sensing something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked gently. I told him everything. The will, the humiliation, the way my mother looked away. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said quietly, "You don't have to keep taking this, Emily." "I'm done taking it," I replied, my voice calm but hollow. "I just don't know what to do next." He looked at me, searching, steady. "Then start by deciding what they deserve." That night, I packed my things. My mother tried to stop me, crying softly, "Emily, please don't go like this." I turned to her, tears finally falling. "You already let them push me out, Mom. I'm just walking where they wanted me, out of sight." I left without looking back. For the next few weeks, I drifted between anger and emptiness. I kept replaying Mark's words, Olivia's smirk, my mother's silence. The more I thought about it, the more the pain sharpened into something clearer, something colder. Late one night, I sat by the window in my small apartment, staring at the city lights below. In my hand was the bracelet Mark had given me years ago, the one I once believed meant love. I turned it over, realizing how cheap it suddenly looked under the harsh light. I whispered to myself, "You destroyed my place in your world. So now, I'll destroy the world that made you proud." The tears stopped coming after that. The grief turned into purpose. I began to think differently, strategically. I knew their secrets, their weaknesses, their fragile facade. For years, I had begged to belong. Now, I would make them beg for mercy. And for the first time, the thought didn't scare me. It felt right. That was the night the pain ended, and the revenge began. After the last of my things were in the back of Mason's car, something inside me stopped trembling. Grief had done its work, it had hollowed me out and left me oddly light. For the first time since that dinner, I could think clearly. The humiliation that once pinned me to the floor became fuel. I would not beg for belonging. I would take what respect they stole from me by showing them the truth they buried. I began quietly. First, I rebuilt a life that couldn't be stepped on. I found a job that paid my rent and brought me back a little dignity. I read legal blogs late into the night, learning how estates and trusts could be manipulated. I learned the language of financial papers the way I had once learned my school textbooks, with determination and a stubborn thirst to understand. Mason sat with me through hours of research and said, "You're not the same person who left that house." I only nodded. Then I started looking for cracks. The will had been changed, signatures, dates, transfers, all of it left fingerprints. I called in favors from a paralegal friend of Mason's who owed him one. We dug into public filings, corporate papers, and old deeds. Little things emerged, an anonymous transfer, an unsigned amendment, a shell company listed as a beneficiary. Each discovery felt like finding a match in a dark room. I began to see how quickly a life could be set on fire. Emotionally, I trained myself the way I used to train for exams, steady, relentless, unemotional. I practiced being calm in front of witnesses, perfected the neutral look I'd worn when Mark cut me off at the table. I recorded conversations when I could, always careful where I placed my phone. I collected every insult, every offhand dismissal, every casual lie that had been told about me. If they had been cruel in daylight, I would expose them in the open where shame would sting more than any private hurt. Aunt Claire became my secret ally. She hated the idea of injustice and had long resented Mark's arrogance. "Don't make this a vendetta," she warned once. "Make it a reckoning." I understood the difference. Revenge is poison. Reckoning is truth. We mapped out possible venues that would force a public response: an estate hearing, a charity gala where Mark wore his reputation like armor, or Olivia's wedding announcement, if it remained on the calendar. Each event came with risks, witnesses, lawyers, denials. Each also offered the possibility that their polished life would crack. I considered legality as carefully as I considered hurt. I hired a discreet attorney, not to start a war, but to keep every step clean. "Exposure must be undeniable," my lawyer said. "If you want them shut down, show the facts they can't argue with." So I focused on documentation, bank statements, notarized copies, recorded admissions. Nothing theatrical, only proof. Proof that would leave them exposed and their excuses ruined. But the plan was personal, too. I wanted them to understand why I had done it, not to watch them suffer blindly, but to watch the gospel of their choices reflected back at them. The way they chose blood over bond, appearances over truth. I rehearsed my lines in the dark, the calm sentences that would bury their polite smiles. Night after night, I pieced the puzzle together. My anger smoothed into a quiet strategy. I was no longer broken. I was careful, patient, and dangerous in the best way, precise. When the date for Olivia's pre-wedding charity gala arrived on the calendar, I felt the plan settle into place. I had the documents, the witnesses, the legal cover, and the one person who knew my history sitting quietly in the crowd. I took a breath, looked at the folder on my table, and whispered to myself, "This ends tonight." The next morning I drove to the venue and felt the first real tremor of fear and exhilaration run through me. The night of Olivia's charity gala shimmered with the kind of perfection money buys. Chandeliers glowed, champagne sparkled, and laughter echoed under soft jazz. Every guest wore confidence like perfume. Mark stood near the stage, shaking hands, basking in admiration. Olivia glided beside him in a silver gown, radiant and smug, the perfect image of a daughter raised in luxury. I arrived quietly, dressed in black, not mourning, but ready for truth. My heart pounded, but my face was calm. Mason squeezed my shoulder before I entered. "Are you sure you want to do this here?" he whispered. I looked at him, voice steady. They wanted an audience. Let's give them one. The program began. Speeches, laughter, applause. Olivia was called to the stage to thank her father for sponsoring her foundation. "Everything I am," she said, "is because of my father's faith in me." That was my cue. I stepped forward. The crowd parted slightly, curious. "And everything you have," I said, loud enough to cut through the music, "is built on lies." The room fell silent. Mark turned, disbelief on his face. "Emily, what are you doing here?" I walked toward him, folder in hand. "Telling the truth. Something this family has avoided for years." Olivia laughed nervously. "This isn't the place for your drama." "Oh, I think it's perfect," I replied, pulling a microphone from the table. "Since you all love performances, let me give you the final act." I placed copies of documents on the nearest table. The amended will, the falsified property records, the financial transfers. "These," I said, "are the receipts of betrayal. You changed the will illegally, transferred assets under false names, and lied about it. I have proof and witnesses." Mark's composure cracked. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I held up a voice recorder, clicked play. His own voice echoed through the speakers. "She doesn't need that share, Rachel. Olivia's future depends on this inheritance." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Olivia's fiancé stepped back, eyes wide. "Is this true?" he whispered to her. Olivia stammered. "She's making this up." I turned to my mother, standing pale at the edge of the room. "You knew, didn't you?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I tried to protect you." "No," I said softly, "you protected them." Mark moved closer, his voice rising. "You're destroying this family." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, you destroyed it the day you chose blood over love, lies over dignity." Aunt Claire, seated near the front, stood and addressed the room. "She's telling the truth. I've seen the papers. Mark, you used your power to humiliate her, to erase her." Reporters had already started filming, flashes of cameras, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Olivia's perfect mask began to crumble. "Dad, say something," she pleaded. But Mark just stood there, cornered, his reputation collapsing under the weight of his own words. I felt no joy, just a strange calmness, a release that came from finally being heard. "I never wanted your money," I said, voice trembling but strong. "All I ever wanted was respect. But now, I'll settle for the truth." The audience erupted. Whispers, judgment, shock. Mark's business partner stepped away from him. Guests avoided eye contact. The empire he built on appearances began to crumble right there, in front of the cameras. Olivia's fiancé walked off stage, shaking his head. "I can't marry into this," he muttered, leaving her standing alone under the bright lights. Tears streaked Olivia's makeup as she turned toward me. "You ruined everything." "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I just revealed what was already rotten. Mark called my name once more, but I didn't look back. I walked toward the exit as security and reporters swarmed the stage. Outside, the night air was sharp, alive. Mason caught up to me, breathless. "It's done," he said. I nodded. "No," I whispered, watching the lights of the hall flicker behind us. "It's just beginning." Inside, chaos reigned, voices shouting, cameras flashing, a family finally unmasked. For the first time in years, I felt free, not vindicated, not triumphant, but free. And as I walked away, heels clicking on the marble steps, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. They would never forget my name again. The next morning, the city woke up to headlines about the Harts, respected businessman exposed in inheritance scandal. Mark's face was everywhere, but his confident smile was gone. Every news anchor repeated the words from the recording I'd played. The empire he'd built on lies was now a house collapsing in slow motion. I didn't watch the news. I didn't need to. Truth, once spoken, didn't need to be repeated. It just needed to echo long enough for the guilty to hear it. By noon, I received a message from Aunt Claire. "It's over, Emily. The lawyers confirmed everything. They can't hide now." I sat by my window, staring at the rain streaking down the glass. The same rain that had fallen the day Mark told me I wasn't his responsibility. Back then, I felt small and unwanted. Now, that same sound felt like a cleansing, a quiet applause from the world itself. In the days that followed, their world unraveled. Olivia's engagement was called off. Her fiancé couldn't stand the humiliation. Mark resigned from his firm under pressure, citing personal matters. Grandma Louise stopped answering calls. And my mother, she finally came to see me. She looked older, smaller somehow, when she arrived at my apartment. Her eyes were red, her voice shaky. "I didn't know how to protect you," she whispered. "I thought silence would keep us safe." I looked at her for a long moment. "Silence doesn't protect anyone, Mom," I said softly. "It only teaches people how to hurt you quietly." She began to cry, and for the first time, I didn't reach out to comfort her. I'd spent too many years cushioning everyone else's guilt. "I forgive you," I said finally, "but I can't go back there. Not ever again." When she left, I felt lighter. Not because I'd won, revenge doesn't bring victory, but because I had finally ended a story that had once defined me. Mason came by that evening with 2 cups of coffee. We sat on the balcony, watching the sun dip behind the skyline. "So," he asked, "does it feel like justice?" I smiled faintly. "It feels like peace. Justice was never about revenge. It was about making them face the truth they ran from." He nodded. "You didn't just expose them, Emily. You reclaimed yourself." His words stayed with me long after he left. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to prove my worth. I simply was, and that was enough. Weeks later, I received a legal letter confirming that Mark's fraudulent will had been annulled. The assets were frozen pending investigation. I didn't care about the money. My victory had already been sealed in the silence that followed their downfall. Sometimes I still dream about that night. The lights, the whispers, the shock in Mark's eyes when he realized he'd underestimated me. But I don't wake up angry anymore. Just calm. People always say revenge destroys both sides. Maybe that's true. But sometimes, what we call revenge is simply truth finding its way home. As I looked out at the night, the city lights flickering like distant stars, I whispered the words that had become my truth. Respect isn't something you're given. It's something you take back when the world tries to steal it. And with that, I closed the final chapter of that life, not with bitterness, but with quiet pride. Because dignity, once reclaimed, doesn't shout. It simply stands, unshaken, unashamed, and finally free.